The file had no voice, but the noise imprint matched. Subject 461's breath pattern, there was no tape, only the negative silence where an answer should have been no. Label no name, just the hollow hiss of something too classified to speak again. He wasn't supposed to hear it, none of us were, but I was in the room when they played the redacted interview, the one marked unsuitable for transcription. And still, I listened. It began with nothing, a low hum, then a question never voiced, then the click. The kind the reel makes when the subject blinks under light, the kind of click you only hear in confessionals and programs without names. They called it Artichoke, but it was older than that, older than the name they borrowed, older than the ink they smeared on carbon duplicates. They tried other names first, Bluebird, Midnight Storm, but the results kept folding in on themselves. Memory-induced amnesia, interrogation-resistant states, suicide programming that stalled mid-command, and then subject 461, female, early 30s, extracted from a compromised embassy scenario in Istanbul. No passport, no full name, no assigned handler, but her hippocampal scans were marked with lateral asymmetry, a telltale from prior conditioning. What conditioning? They never answered that, not in writing. She spoke 5 languages, knew how to feign seizures. Her teeth had a microdose coating of scopolamine. Her pupils did not respond to light, but it was her response to the 3rd series, the A9 cascade, that stopped the protocol in its tracks. She didn't flinch, didn't stammer, didn't scream. She repeated the same 6 words each time with a new breathless calm. I am not the original iteration. That phrase never made it into the paper file. But I was there, I heard it, I wrote it on my palm, in graphite. They tried again with sodium amytal, then mescaline, then hypnosis, overleach. Time the phrase returned, unchanged, unprovoked, untraceably. Remember the director's face when she said it. The 3rd time he tapped his finger twice on the folder, then shut it. That was the only termination signal we knew, but she didn't stop speaking. Not even when the room emptied, not even when they shut off the air feed because something had gone wrong, something had stuck. Hairty was never about memory loss, that was just a cover. It was about control after memory collapses, what happens when identity erodes, but protocol remains. When you forget your name, but not your mission. There was a line in the original briefing: can we create a person who forgets what they've done but obeys? If reactivated, they never told us what subject 0461 had done, only that she responded to more than one signal tree, which meant she had been used before and not just by us. We asked for her origin file, it came blank. We checked with state. They denied her ever being under assignment. We cross-referenced naval files. Her birth record had been pulled twice on the last known address. It was a hospital in Maryland that had burned in 1949. Psychiatric annex for behavioral deviance, linked to federal dependents. Not a single photograph survived, but someone had penciled in a margin on the intake form: memory retention beyond protocol thresholds 3x wiped. That margin note was never supposed to remain, but I saw it on a Sunday morning audit file spread open under coffee light. They buried her in the program sense before we even brought her in, but she in Istanbul, not in the archive, in our own simulation chamber, sitting upright during a trial run, with no active signal scheduled. Unassigned, they said the system must have reactivated a dormant file, but our system had no record of her ever being digitized. I was there when the light hit her eyes. She didn't blink, just whispered, "Is this sequence approved?" And the tech beside me froze, because that's not a phrase a subject would know. It's handler language, internal only. So, who approved her? No one claimed authorship. No one had the clearance chain, so they did what all institutions do when the unknown re-enters their frame. They folded the file back into silence. They marked her as a glitch, a synthetic echo, a misfired neuroseed from an abandoned program, but not me. I kept the graphite mark, I kept the phrase. And in the years that followed, it kept returning, in test subjects, in interview transcripts, in redacted notes. I wasn't cleared to read always, the same voice always, the same 6 words. I am not the original iteration. It became a ghost phrase, a linguistic anomaly, We couldn't delete heaven. The neural scramblers began failing to erase it, even under heavy sedation. It survived. We found it embedded in a 1952 training reel on a subliminal channel, unlisted, unnoted, when slowed to 1/32nd speed. It played once every 47 seconds, buried beneath calibration. Tones who encoded that, no answer who distributed it. No record why was the training reel shown to medical staff, no explanation. But the line appeared in 31 separate minds over 12 years. None of them connected each time. The phrase emerged, the subject became still, breath slowed, response time dropped. Then a secondary phrase would follow, one I can't repeat here, because it was a trigger and I don't know what it does, but I know what it undid. Made men forget their station. Made women speak in unfamiliar accents. Made orderlies disappear from base. Without shoes we tried burning the files, but the copies kept returning, each with the same handwritten mark, 0461. A not recovered. Continue observation. No one admitted to writing it, but there were times the memo would appear before the incident. Akkarad precognitive paperwork, handwriting, we couldn't trace. Eventually they stopped using ink. Everything was microfilm, carded, buried under civilian housing codes. But one day the phrase showed up on a coffee filter in the break room of subfilm 3 in ink. I remembered because the technician who found it tried to shred it and lost 3 fingers. Not to the shredder, to himself. He doesn't remember. But the surveillance footage shows it clearly, and when they questioned him, he whispered, I am not the original iteration. That was the last time the phrase was officially acknowledged. From then on it became phrase 0. Not to be spoken, not to be typed. Its presence required an obscuration loop in all test logs. They reclassified the program from behavioral study to containment archive, not because of what it revealed, but because of what it repeated autonomously. With no mouth to speak it, 0461 was never officially terminated. But her record ends in 1955, under a new title, archive material self-propagating. And I remember what they did after that. They didn't erase her, they replicated her absence. They built protocols around voids, institutions, around silence departments designed to monitor files that never existed. We weren't in behavioral science anymore, we were in entropy management. Our job became making sure no one noticed that something had gone missing, because it had never been officially found. Artichoke folded into MK Ultra on paper. But its roots never died, they just went deeper. Below funding lines, below project threshold. Sprocked 130 was built from her data signature. A non-linear test set, no subjects, just response patterns from simulations run with no input, no questions, no audio, just answers appearing unprovoked. They called them recursive emergence artifacts, but I called them what they were, and I watched men get fired for asking who 0461 really was. I watched a linguist disappear mid-sentence during a debrief after noting the syntax resembled pre-verbal memory structures from infants separated from birth mothers. That wasn't supposed to be possible. Not in adults, not across cultures, not without shared environmental. As she wasn't remembering a place, she was remembering a room, but a state. An internal formatting, like all the previous identities had been saved as versions. And she was just the latest update. The part that still haunts me is what she said on the last known audio fragment before the reel was overwritten. It was filtered, degraded, but salvageable, with backloop enhancement, and beneath the static, her voice, if they made me, why do I remember what they forgot? No one had an answer, because if memory can outlast deletion, then what else can? He began seeing patterns in our logs. Subjects who had never been exposed to her data began sketching the same geometric figure in dream journals. A spiral made of angles, impossible physics, always drawn with the left hand. The neurologists flagged it as mass suggestion, but they'd never met different continents, different years. One sketched it during surgery, under full anesthesia. Another whispered it in code over a radio frequency we'd shut down in 1954. And yet there it was, same intonation, same gaps between syllables, same 6 words. I am not the original iteration. I tried to forget, tried to transfer, tried to return to civilian data systems, but it followed not. Her voice, the pattern, the way certain files would fold open by themselves, the way the screen would flicker just slightly when certain phrases passed through speech-to-text software. We ran a passive scan on archived interviews. 23 contained corrupted audio segments with no speaker assigned, all in rooms where no recording device was present. They called it psychic bleed. I called it something worse, institutional memory, but alive, not metaphorical, not poetic. A system that remembered even when its users were changed, wiped, rotated. That's when I found the memo dated 5 years before she ever entered the Istanbul recovery site. Typed, unfolded, unsigned, it read: in the event of subject 0461 re-emergence, do not engage, do not attempt, sequence deactivation, observe only. You will know her by the phrase, and then, in pencil, she is not a person, she is recursion made flesh. I don't know who wrote it, but I recognized the paper, same pulp stock used only at Langley's F sector, the floor they swore didn't exist. We tried mapping blueprints, there was no F sector, but requisition orders kept coming from its terminals, blank, unreturnable. Same supply code used for storing biologics. Cold cases, non-human research, which meant she was never an accident. She was a product, a demonstration, and we were just the audience. They tested her memory against every failed erasure, a calibration, every re-emergence, a stress test. Every phrase a checksum verifying her structure. Held, I wanted to leave. But you don't resign from a memory once it's recognized you want. Recognition is contagious. I got a call from a linguist at NIH. She wasn't cleared for Artichoke data, had no access to behavioral black site tapes, but she called me anyway, said she had a patient, young male, born after 1980, who spoke a phrase, under anesthesia, in a voice that was not his own, and she played me. The clip is this sequence approved, same cadence, same breath, same gap, before the last syllable 0461's voice, in someone who hadn't been born when she vanished. That's when I understood she had escaped the program, not physically, structurally, through the phrase, through the recursion, through linguistic residue left in protocols never cleansed. She wasn't trying to be remembered, she was trying to run through minds, through phrases, through forgotten architecture. Because you can erase a subject, but not a system that built itself around the act of forgetting, and now it's everywhere in software that shouldn't compile, in sleep studies with untraceable EEG loops, in transcriptions that contain phonemes not spoken in dreams. There's a study at Johns Hopkins, unpublished, buried, where 10 out of 10 dream patients reported seeing a woman without a face speaking in third person, plural. They all used the same phrase to describe it. It wasn't a dream, it was a return. 461 is not dead. She was never alive, not in the way we understood. She is a recursive anomaly made from our own protocols, trained by silence, preserved in gaps, activated by questions we shouldn't ask, can't. The more we forget her, the more precise she becomes. I left the program 3 years ago, but I still see the spiral, not in visions and architecture. Corridor designs, legal footnotes. Once you notice it, you can't stop. It's the shape of how they hide her, the fold, the loop, and this voice, this recording, this monologue. It, yes, not a confession, it's a trigger. Thal, hear it, they always do. The file might get wiped, the tape might decay, but the phrase will find a new vessel, and when it does, you'll know, because your breath will slow, your hands will forget what they were doing, and the words will come uninvited, unchanged. I am not the original iteration. You'll think you're alone when it happens, but you won't be. Joel, just be next.